This video is sponsored by Nvidia, first taking a look at some community-made modding projects using RTX Remix to add enhanced assets and path tracing to older games, and then I'll use some powerful new AI-driven tools to change the look of Deus Ex. If you need a quick recap on what it is, then check out my earlier video on it here. It is essentially a new modding tool that enables talented modders and artists to remaster classic games up to the visual quality of modern ones. You can drop high quality assets and materials into games and relight them realistically with full path tracing, which is the cutting edge standard for lighting in games. Understandably, it will take a while longer for modding teams to finish their remasters of games, but I was given some early sneak peeks at a few projects. Bear in mind they are incomplete and in early stages, but they nicely show two different teams' visions of what an RTX remixed remaster means to them. Dark Messiah is the first of the games that I'll be covering, and what a great game to be getting a visual overhaul. This game has some incredible environments with a real sense of verticality that few games have attempted to match. Plus, it's got one of the meatiest kicks ever added to a game. It's so satisfying to kick an orc off a cliff, or to collapse a structure with your foot, or to send someone sprawling into a nearby fire. You can really tell that this was done by the same developers who then went on to make Dishonored. This game's also got some really cringe dialogue, but try to ignore that. In getting this game ready for the remixed version, the modders have come up with a bunch of custom launch option commands that you just copy paste into here like so to get this 20-year-old game playing nicely with the ray tracing. Some of these launch options are there to remove pixel shaders and other things which don't work well with path tracing. Here's Dark Messiah, DirectX 9. And here it is in DirectX 7. The most obvious thing is that it's changed in brightness because it's removed the HDR. But more importantly, it's removed the pixel shading from all the surfaces. So while the torch still lights that bit of the room up, it no longer lights up each pixel on a per pixel basis. That's why this whole texture appears to shift slightly as pixel shading is enabled and disabled. The texture isn't changing or moving, it's just no longer being shaded based on the height and direction of each and every pixel. Hence why it's called pixel shading. And the last change with DirectX 7, and quite an obvious one, is that it's broken anything containing a reflection of some sort. Yes, this looks worse than the original DirectX 9 mode does, but the hope is that now it's in DirectX 7, path tracing will be able to add these effects back in again, and more besides, and we'll be able to do them all better because it's all done properly, because path tracing. So here it is, the base game now with path tracing enabled. You'll notice it's got a lot darker. Now this doesn't have to be the case, you have complete control in Remix to change the brightness and colour of the light sources, and even to add new ones. But bear in mind any changes you make won't change the stealth mechanics, as it is just a visual change for the player, and not for the NPCs in-game. Aside from the brightness change, we can also immediately see how it now casts proper defined shadows from everything in the scene. That includes your character's body as well, since most of your body is properly rendered in the game. Guess which bit isn't? But only a few of these commands help remove incompatible features. Some actually add more stuff than would normally be visible, which goes against how games typically work, which is by not drawing whatever they think they can get away with not drawing, which gives path tracing more information to work with. Even information about stuff that isn't directly visible to the player, since that stuff may still be seen in reflections, or maybe reflecting light around a corner in a way that will be seen by the player. I'm sure these other commands are very important as well. So, we've got Dark Messiah all path traced and stuff. The reflections are no longer broken, but it still doesn't look as good as it could do, since the materials themselves weren't made with path tracing in mind. What we need is PBR, which assigns all the properties a surface might have. Now you can create PBR materials using the AI methods I'll be talking about later in this video, but even better still are handcrafted ones, made specifically for this particular remake, which I will now enable here. This is the full Remix experience, path tracing and custom assets and materials. One of the coolest new effects is the use of parallax occlusion mapping to help give flat surfaces 3D details. As you can see, before enabling this effect, the surface here is flat, yet occlusion mapping sticks some bits out and sucks other bits in, and shades it all convincingly. This is an especially handy feature on a game from this era, where there was enough computing power at the time to draw the big stuff in 3D, but not enough for all the little details that the likes of occlusion mapping can now fulfill the role of. Let's go on a tour around these bumpy surfaces. All these large blocks in the walls are now all sticking out slightly unevenly, and there are even 3D blades of grass. All these effects are quite subtly done. They don't leap out at you straight away, but it helps these surfaces stand up under closer scrutiny, and in this grass's case, convincingly transitions between lit up and in the shade, based on the direction that you're viewing it from. This wall right here was completely flat, but thanks to the remaster has now created the look of 3D windows and a door. The PBR materials also give the different materials different properties, like the metal on the door a polished sheen, and reflections on the glass that now correctly reflect the environment around it. Indoors, the 3D looking stone blocks really mask the flat look of the original areas. Looking at these building surfaces, the new dark, slightly pearlescent look of the glass will be the bit that immediately jumps out to you, but there's more to this than meets the eye. Turns out the wooden details surrounding the glass are now entirely parallax mapped too. If I turn it off, you'll see they were merely painted on before. So this is quite a bold use of parallax occlusion mapping to add quite prominent 3D details onto otherwise completely flat surfaces. Now, it's still early days for this mod, and a lot of the levels haven't received any patches or custom assets or details just yet, but you can already see the difference that path tracing is making to the lighting. Dark Messiah stands to benefit quite a lot from this dynamic lighting, since so much of the level could be kicked, broken or destroyed, and the Source engine struggles to light a lot of this dynamic sort of scenery. Take this area for instance. Now, this is a moment from the campaign that everyone who's played this game will remember, since you no doubt died here. So there's a bunch of precious items on the far side of this room, set in this precarious house here, suspended high up in the cliffs. And of course it's all a trap, and as you approach it the floor collapses, sending you plummeting to your death. The Source engine can't change its lighting in real time, so it just makes the entire room bright and glowing throughout. But while this dynamic sort of environment really gets the Source engine's cracks to show, the crack gets to show how great real-time path tracing is under the same challenging circumstances, with the surrounding room lighting up more and more as the crack opens up. And once the floor falls away completely, the remaining bits are shown lit up in all their glory. Gorgeous. But of course you won't be there to appreciate it because you'll have gone splat with the rest of it. Here's a slightly less dramatic but equally dynamic example of path traced lighting in action. All this stuff can be destroyed and the Source engine has no way of properly shading it, so it all just remains eerily bright and disconnected from the environment around it. But now, thanks to the magic of path tracing, you can see it's now all properly shaded and one with the rest of the world, just waiting for you to go and kick some poor soul into it. Not that I have an obsession with early Source games, but Vampire the Masquerade is another game I'm interested in that's getting an RTX remaster. This game was released in 2004, yet its unofficial patch has been continually maintained ever since, with the latest update to it being rolled out just the other month. It's a ridiculous achievement really, with West 5 constantly patching up any issues with the game the community points out, going as far as to trawl the game's files for cut content to reintroduce into the game, whilst ensuring it all works nicely on modern systems. So the game's foundations are now very strong, but the remix overhaul is still in its early stages. A few things in the streets have been graphically overhauled, but it's these flats that have had the most done to them so far, and best represent how this 20-year-old game could look once fully remastered. So you have this original version, then you have the original but with path trace lighting, and then you have it with PBR materials and enhanced assets as well, and it goes to show just how much of the improvement comes from the talent and the passion the community has invested into this project. These walls look grottier and more water damaged than ever before thanks to the effort put into re-envisioning this texture, again utilising the parallax displacement mapping to make it look all 3D and warped and damaged. So this is what can be achieved in Remix by a modder who's experienced, patient and talented. But what about me?
If you want to make a covert approach.
This is Deus Ex. I don't have relevant 3D modelling experience, nor am I much of a texture artist either. A few years ago that would have ruled out me modding for any sort of game, but RTX Remix enables the modding bit, and thanks to a comfy UI integration that Nvidia helped me set up, I can now use AI to aid in the texturing bit of the process. They recently showcased it in this video, which shows the game Portal getting completely visually overhauled with just a few short text-driven prompts to define the style of the environment. This really is leveraging a few cutting-edge bits of software all working together to enable something that just a few years ago would have been impossible. Yet now, all it takes is for me to select a texture in the Remix software, then switch over to Comfy UI and type how I want the texture to look, and it will replace that texture with something AI generated instead. If I have this option ticked, then it will be based off the original image somewhat. Otherwise, if I disable it, it will create something simply from the prompt I've requested. And it's not just drawing the texture, it's also generating all the layers to it that are required to get it working nicely with the path tracing, like the roughness and displacement maps. What a fantastic combination of cutting-edge technologies. I almost feel guilty using all of it just to generate cat pictures on video game walls. What's probably more suitable is to keep it similar to the look and style of the original texture. And with the right prompts to describe the materials and what I want from it, what I get out of it looks like a much higher resolution version of the original image. In this instance, complete with a bumpy look to the stones. This is what happens if I deviate slightly further from the original design and into something more original. I could have it all made out of wood, or I could go all out and request plastic bricks, or a cartoony style of wall, or a wall made of ice, or just lots of pictures of cats again. I'll stress now that AI generated stuff isn't intended to replace handcrafted textures, because a human touch is still much better for getting the assets just right. But what these AI generated prompts will help with is to enable smaller modding teams a way to undertake larger remasters than they'd otherwise be able to do. For instance, they could quickly AI generate higher quality versions of all the textures in a game, and then dedicate their time to handcrafting the most important ones, or those where the AI generation wasn't up to scratch in some way. And for lone modders and those with no artistic skills, like me, it will actually make remastering a game possible. As you might have guessed, I'm having a lot of fun messing around with this new tool. And it's crazy to think that just 6 years ago, had you told me about remix and ray tracing in games and this, then I'd have said it was impossible and that's not how computers work. And in about 6 years' time, it will probably all be taken for granted. So in a way, right now in 2024 is the exciting point when we get to see RTX Remix developing, gaining new tricks and features to make remastering older games easier than ever. So I know I've jumped straight in with the super complex AI generated textures here, but the game I'm modding for here, Deus Ex, originally didn't work with Remix at all. This is because it was from such an early era of gaming that it didn't fully utilise the graphics card to draw the graphics. So what Remix saw when the game loaded was just an indecipherable mess of vertex soup that it was unable to add proper path tracing to. But simply by shifting the Unreal Engine 1 based game over to the newly made Echelon renderer enables this game to be compatible with Remix. So while it's more complicated to get RTX support in this game than in some of the others, it is still just a case of looking at the Deus Ex page over on ModDB and by following instructions on what to download and where to put everything. In Deus Ex's case, you simply need to download the Echelon renderer, the latest version of Remix, an optimized config file for Deus Ex that someone else has already made, and the wonderfully named Deus Exe. Then you drag all of this into the game systems folder, et voila, path trace Deus Ex. Sounds complicated, but it's only about 20 minutes of work. The AI image generation tool is a bit more complicated, and it took me maybe 2 hours to set up, using a comprehensive guide that taught me through it step by step. Nvidia says they're hoping to streamline this process, so just see this as being a taster of what's yet to come. But this sort of AI generated component should be considered as an optional extra for modding, and will probably remain quite a niche and advanced tool for the foreseeable future. So I've covered 3 very different remix projects in this video, each a different use case that these tools can be used for. There's my silly little Deus Ex project, made with virtually no modding experience whatsoever. Then there's Dark Messiah, an ambitious remaster of an older game. And then there's Vampire the Masquerade, where the talented modder Safe Milk has revamped a small area of a single level to a sky-high standard. Check out the link in this video's description to view his blog on ModDB, which really helped me to appreciate the sheer amount of love and effort that has gone into his project. He singles out this radio prop as an example of how he extracts a model from the game, overhauls it using some online detective work and his knowledge of 3D modelling, and there you go. A massively improved radio model, and one with materials that work far better with path trace lighting, whilst remaining faithful to the original design. And this being something in a dark corner of a dark apartment is something you could easily miss. But it's a great example of what's possible when a talented and passionate modder really pushes what Remix can do. I'll end with an extract from his blog's conclusion. Hopefully you might have started to realise, hey, wait a minute, I could totally do this. And yeah, you absolutely can. This remaster is just one interpretation of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. And hey, it might not look like the one you were picturing in your head, but that's the beauty of this. You can do your version too. I hope a lot of other people start to get interested in remix and modding. I'd love to see lots of remasters for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines and other games as well, not just the one that is in my head. And then there's this picture of a mouse.